Good morning, Krishna.
Good morning. Good morning, all.
So, speaker is joining. First
Good
speaker.
morning, I'm Dr. Anurag.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Suresh.
Okay, nice. So we can start. So, respected panelists, dear participants, a very good morning to all of you. I, Shreyas Dwivedi, Junior Consultant, National Institute of Disaster Management, welcomes you all in this 3 days online training program, uh, which is on changes in infrastructure, livelihood, and ecosystem services in Indian Sundarbans due to frequent disasters. This program is organized by National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, in collaboration with Resilience Innovation Knowledge Academy, RICA India Private Limited. This is our third day. So, before starting our sessions, I would like to give a brief of previous 2 days sessions which were held. So on the first day, the first session was taken by Dr. Shalini Dhyani, and the session was Introduction to Coastal Ecosystem. And after that, the second session was on understanding the interaction of physical and natural infrastructure in Sundarban. And this was taken by Professor Chandan Ghosh. He is head in Resilient Infrastructure Division and National Institute of Disaster Management. On the second day, the first session was on interlinkages of ecosystem services and livelihood with examples from Sundarban region. And this session was taken by Professor Tohim Ghosh. He briefly discussed about Sundarban biodiversity, land reclamation, people, culture and heritage, rise in relative mean sea level, and important rivers which are in the Sundarban region. And the second session was taken by Professor Ellen Satpathy. uh, that session was on risk to coastal livelihood, infrastructure, and ecosystem services in Sundarban. So this was a very brief about what we have discussed till now. And now today we have two sessions. First is on livelihood resilience and community-based conservation in Sundarban region. And second is on aspects of gender-based resilience in Sundarban. So for the first session, we have Dr. Anamitra Anurag Danda, sir. He is director of the Sundarban programs for WWF India. Sir is a social anthropologist with particular interest in the practice of sustainable development. He has implemented projects in rural and peri-urban areas across sectors spanning aquaculture and agriculture, water and energy access, rural transportation, and conservation. Common to all these projects has been the concept of sustainability. His field work experience is mostly from the Ganga Delta and basin area, and he has the more than 25 years of experience in this field. So with this brief introduction, I request sir to address our participant and discuss about this topic. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shreyash. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to all the participants. It's a pleasure. Uh, Thank you to Rika. Thank you to NIDM for the invitation to speak to the participants here. I've been asked to speak on livelihood resilience and community-based conservation. So essentially two very different things. So my presentation will be in two parts. The first part would be obviously on livelihood resilience, and the second part would be on community conservation, community-based conservation in the Sundarbans, which, as you will see, is actually not much. As Shreyas has introduced me, I am more of a practitioner. I'm actually a full-time practitioner and a part-time scholar, and I have a presentation to share. I hope I'm able to show you my screen, and just bear with me for a moment. Yeah, I think you can see it.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Yes,
good.
sir. Clearly.
Yeah. So as I said, two parts. livelihood resilience and community-based conservation. I'll start with so there are two operative words here. One is the resilience and the other is the community-based. So I will dwell on each of these when I come to the two parts of it. So I'll start with, to me, what resilience or the lack of it looks like. So if I were to plot, as you can see on this graph, well-being against time, there are events that force the well-being of a community, of a household, of a system to come down from where it was prior to the event or at the time of the event. So this is clearly lack of resilience. In case of livelihoods of the people of the Sundarbans, this is quite often the case because of the repeated hazardous events that this region is faced with, and also because it is the location, the geographical location of the space. We are talking about a space which abuts the largest bay in the world, which is fairly shallow. It's amongst the warmest water bodies in the world, in the Indian Ocean system. And it's a deltaic region. It's the very end of the delta, and it's a fairly new delta. So disastrous events or hazardous events turning into disasters is quite often, as you would have heard on video over the last 2 days. So this is what lack of resilience looks to me. Whereas if a system is resilient, system or household or a community, this is what it would look like. The well-being after a period of time bounces back to where it was. So if livelihood were to be resilient, this is what it should look like. Now, the reason I would like to go beyond this, because I, do not directly come from the disaster community. I come from the adaptation to climate change community. So we use the word slightly differently. And therefore, the aspirations are also a little different. To me, this is what I would like to see. I would like to see the events occurring, yet the well-being remains undiminished for the people of the Sundarbans. This is what we aspire for. This is what we work towards, and it remains a challenge, a fairly big challenge, and not easy to deal with. But as you would have seen this, again, a different version of this probably because the disaster risk community uses it slightly differently. But in principle, it's the same thing. We're looking at different kinds of hazards. We're looking at exposure of systems and populations. And of course, we are looking at inherent vulnerability of the exposed system or the community. So when a place like the Sundarbans has to face with multiple hazards, starting with, I will talk about erosion. You can see there are different colored lines on this map, and there are solid colors. The solid colors, the yellow ones are the settled areas within the Sundarbans, which has about 5 million people. And the green one is, of course, the natural area, which is amongst the largest mangrove ecosystem. You would have heard of it from Professor Tuhin Ghosh yesterday to quite an extent. I'll not go into it, but over a period of time, say for when maybe I was a year old or some such, the islands, particularly in the south and the west of the region, this is just the Indian part of the region. This region spans India and Bangladesh, and in India it is contained within the state of West Bengal. So this is just the part within West Bengal. So as you can see, there are different colored lines which show the extent of the landmass, be it the natural area or the human inhabited area. And this has continuously eroded. It is eroding even now. So even if we did not have the challenge of sea level rise, we would still be faced with challenges for the ecosystem and the people of the region. So between the time, say, when I was a year old until the time my youngest daughter was a year old. The region has become much smaller. We have lost across 4 community development blocks, 15 revenue villages. These revenue villages no longer exist. In our population records, they show as depopulated. Now, they're not really depopulated, so to say, because the landmass no longer exists. So this is one of the hazards that the region has to deal with. And oftentimes, when we think of disasters, we are more concerned with the rapid onset events. But these are also events that cause untold misery to the people of the Sundarbans. And also it has a bearing on the unique mangrove ecosystem. The terrestrial component is becoming smaller and smaller. The Sundarbans is very well known for its tigers, and the terrestrial component is becoming smaller. So even if the tiger numbers were to remain the same or stable, the tiger density would go up over a period of time. And that would pose a different set of challenges, resulting in human-wildlife conflict. This is an image of obviously somebody's house. At first impression, this might look like being struck by a cyclonic event, which is not the case. This place is just eroding away, and it's just a matter of time. In fact, this house no longer exists. This was photographed several years ago. And this is not the only structure that has given way to erosion. So erosion is one of the major challenges for the region. It will continue to remain so. Professor Ghosh, Tohin Ghosh was there yesterday speaking to all of you. One of the papers that he has, I mean, he's co-authored and authored numerous papers. He's an academician of great repute and an IPCC author. One of their studies show that erosion rather than inundation would be the dominant cause of loss of land in the region until at least the year 2100. Only in case of the highest scenario of emission and global warming does inundation due to sea level rise become the dominant process causing land loss. So land loss is something that we have to deal with. We also have to deal with subsidence. This region, particularly the Ganga Delta, essentially the Sundarbans is spread across the Ganga Delta and the Brahmaputra Delta. So particularly along the Ganga Delta, because of diversion of water, because of lack of supply of silt, because of abstraction of water, and because of natural compaction. Subsidence is something that has to be lived with. Even structures such as this, which used to be a forest camp in Bangladesh, are crumbling down. So this is not the only example where we have to deal with situations such as this. And none of these are rapid onset events, but nevertheless have to be dealt with. Rapid onset is this. We are faced with cyclonic storms. Over the last 3 years, we faced 4 in the region. This representation is slightly out of date. This is for the period 2005 until 2015. These are all the storms during that period globally. And as you can see, within the Bay of Bengal area, there is a fairly good amount of concentration of these lines. What has happened over this period of time since 2015 is that the color has changed from being blue to more towards yellow and orange, indicating that the intensity of these events is becoming more severe. We are not necessarily facing more number of cyclonic storms, but they are becoming more intense. And this has to do with, where the Sundarbans is situated. As I've said, it's a shallow area. It's the largest bay. It's the warmest part of the Indian Ocean system, and it is connected. Sundarbans is connected to the Himalayas. It is connected to the Indian Ocean region, and any change in any of these two major features of the world has a bearing on the Sundarbans. The delta, as I said, because of the tectonic shift moving eastward, flow of water becoming less, because of human intervention, flow of water becoming even lesser still. Lesser still is the flow of silt that is required to keep the delta in balance. None of that is happening the way it used to happen, and therefore erosion is something that we have to live with. We also have to live with higher temperature in the bay. And the primary reason for the storms becoming more intense is because of the amount of heat that gets trapped in the oceanic system. The largest temperature sink, so to say, on this planet. So what do we do when it comes to resilience of livelihoods? The livelihoods in the Sundarbans primarily, you might have heard from Professor Satpathy, is primarily based on agriculture and fishing and fishery. Now, when be it slow onset or rapid onset events occur, they have a bearing on the livelihood of the people. The storms have, the potential to cause damage because of strong winds, because of the water it brings, or both. So those who practice aquaculture, particularly freshwater aquaculture within the deltaic islands, lose their crops because of saltwater inundation. Now, what choice do they have? How do we make them more resilient? There are ways of doing it. I mean, I talked about the hazards. We will talk about the exposure of the system. The events are so large. Say, for example, a cyclonic event that pretty much everyone in the area is exposed to a similar extent. However, when it comes to erosion, when it comes to subsidence, not everyone is exposed to the hazard to the same extent. Some places are more prone to erosion and subsidence than others. So when we are talking about high intensity weather events, it spares nobody because, and it still remains unpredictable as to which path it will take. Although we are now much better placed in terms of receiving early warning. It comes fairly well in advance, and preparatory steps can be taken. But what do we do about people with livelihoods that are inherently vulnerable? So when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to culturing fish, there are ways we can do it. So one is to move temporarily, and the other is to move physically so as not to be exposed. So the people from the 23 villages overall, the 15 villages in the 4 community development blocks or sub-districts that I referred to have suddenly moved away. And if they have moved within the region, of course, they remain exposed to the hazard, particularly to cyclonic storms. But if they have moved away, further north, further west, then the chances are that they would be less exposed to the hazards that the people of this ecosystem of the Sundarbans will face with. However, if we move the pond physically from land to water, the chances of reducing the vulnerability are much higher. This is a structure that has been put up. This is an experimental structure by the West Bengal University of Animal and Fishery Sciences. This has been around for 4 years. This has survived 4 cyclones. And this is an arrangement in which fish culture is possible. Now, because the water is brackish, it no longer supports freshwater freshwater aquaculture, which somehow the Bengali palate seems to have a preference for rather than saltwater fish. But nevertheless, a fish farmer is still able to get a crop. Right? Now, the challenge is this is an additional investment that needs to be made. And therefore, if the fish farmer were to be able to replicate a model such as this, his or her earning will have to be higher than what it is now. Because if the earning remains the same, this additional investment in terms of an infrastructure that is resilient remains out of the scope or the feasibility or the viability. So when we are trying to build resilient livelihoods, it's just not, replacing or tinkering with the practices or the infrastructure. It is also to do with the produce. It is also to do with the market linkages for the produce. So if this fish farmer or a group of fish farmers were to not, move up the economic value chain and not make more money, they would not be able to adopt this infrastructure and the practice that this calls for. This also applies to the agriculture. In this case, as you can see, there are these plots of land that we have demarcated on this map. These are 29 clusters, each of nearly a hectare. And there are essentially 80 farmers clubbed together in these clusters. The reason for doing so is if we notice the period of cyclonic hits, there is a particular window. I mean, there are two windows. One is pre-monsoon, the other is post-monsoon. Now, agriculture in the Sundarbans is essentially paddy agriculture. It is rain-fed. The region does not have a lot of fresh water. It does have groundwater, but we don't know, there is no quantification. And therefore, whether it contributes to further subsidence, we don't know. And therefore, as a rather conservative conservation organization, we do not promote exploitation of groundwater for agricultural purposes. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to promote agriculture during dry winter months. But as I said, this is also the period where water is rather scarce. So if agriculture has to thrive during this period, it has to be highly water efficient. And also the crop has to be such that the additional investment is recouped within a reasonable period of time. So here, these clusters have been identified for irrigation intelligence. It will do two things. One, it will make water use far more efficient than what it is. And it will also force these farmers to produce a single crop. So anybody within one cluster, irrespective of whether 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 farmers together constitute that cluster, will have to practice the same, have to cultivate the same crop, for the simple reason that why we call it irrigation intelligence. The system is actually quite dumb and cannot distinguish between different crops if they are close by. And therefore, for inputs to be received by the farmers, it has to be the same crop. Again, as I said, it is not the practice, it is not the intelligence, it's not the infrastructure alone that will make livelihoods more resilient. It is also the market linkages and the price realization for the producers that will make things either more resilient or keep them as they are. So this is one of the realizations that I've had, and it has taken us a while. Actually, I've been in the Sundarbans since 1997. I've been with WWF since 2005. And over a period of time, this has been the realization that when we are trying to make things more resilient, it is just not the practice, it's just not the produce, it's just not the infrastructure. It is a combination of multiple factors, including market, which might be actually quite distant. For example, another example is, this is what we are now working on, is fish disaster shelter. We have disaster shelter for people. We have that can also accommodate livestock, but we do not have a facility that can accommodate fish crop. So if we have these structures, they could be like these within FRP tanks. They could be within enclosed ponds where brackish water does not come in, might be able to save the fish crop. Now, this is cost intensive. If the fish crop were to secure the same price as it does normally, this is not going to work. This additional investment, if it is philanthropic, yes, but if it is to become a model that can be either financed by banks or institutional finance can be availed of, or the people become well endowed enough to be able to afford it themselves, this is not going to work if price realization is not higher. And therefore, for fish, which is essentially protein supply for people, but at a cost beyond which people in this part of the country will not be buying, we started looking at protein supply for pets. If you look at the market for processed food for pets, now runs into billions of rupees. If we are able to tap into that value chain, then the fish crop, if it is saved through an intervention such as this, the fish disaster shelter, then it becomes viable. Otherwise, every time there is a storm, if that storm also brings in brackish water into the area and inundates agricultural fields and ponds, the crop will always be lost, right? So, as I said, my presentation will have two parts to it. So this is what I had in mind so far as livelihoods, resilient livelihoods was concerned. And then I also have the other part, which is the community-based conservation. We are a conservation organization, amongst the largest in the world. And if conservation could be practiced community-based, we would not be required. Organizations like WWF would not be required. So what's happening? So in terms of the natural area, over a period of time, the natural area has shrunk considerably. It is at least half of what it used to be, say in 1770s. Now, this is obviously during the colonial period. For the colonial administration, this was an area that was teeming with wildlife. It was causing disease. It was a resource that could be exploited, and therefore forest was cleared and the land was brought under cultivation so that it could be taxed. We've had the Permanent Settlement Act since 1793 until it was abolished. We have had the zamindari system since then until it was abolished after India became a republic, and we had our constitution in place. And the abolition of the zamindari system was part of the first amendment to the constitution itself. So because of the commercial interests of the administration, initially the East India Company and then the British Indian government, this natural area was cleared. We are now left with about 9,000 square kilometers of natural area, about 60% of which is within Bangladesh and 40% in India. Within those cleared areas, on the Indian side is where we now have that 5 million population. None of these people are indigents, so to say. They were all brought over, or they came on their own violation to seek opportunities that were opening up because of land clearing and all of that. And this clearing was not driven by the communities. It was, as I said, the commercial interest of the East India Company. So when it came to conserving it, also was through the directive of the government of that time. It did not come about because of the community. One, it did not have a community to begin with. This was clearly forested area. This is a map from the 1830s. This is also the map that shows the outer edges of the natural area, what is demarcated as Dampier-Hodges line. This was done in the 1830s to demarcate between the forest and the revenue land. Because those who were at the edges of the forest were obviously clearing forests and bringing more and more land under cultivation. And the administration of that time thought they were losing out on potential revenue. And therefore, this line was demarcated. Anything south of that line on the Indian side is still referred to as the Sundarbans region, although in Bangladesh, it is only the forested area that is still referred to as the Sundarbans. So for us, the Sundarbans region has people and natural area. And in terms of conservation, the practice was, as I said, again, state-driven rather than a community model. So we did not have forest laws until 1865. That was the first time the forest law came into place. In fact, the Sundarbans was subjected to the ramifications of the forest laws at the first instance, anywhere on the subcontinent. And prior to the law, during the period when Lord Dalhousie was the Governor General, we had this Charter of Indian Forestry in 1855. And this removed people, so to say, from natural areas in terms of what people could do and could not do. So this was a game changer. So any land that was not under cultivation and did not have explicit private rights became property of the state. Not that it was very different prior to this charter being issued, but nobody really enforced it. But once the charter was issued, it started to be enforced. And so therefore, people and natural areas on the subcontinent, particularly in the Sundarbans, because as I said, this was at that time, Calcutta used to be the capital of the country. This was the area that was natural area that was closest. And this was also the area or the forested area that was subject to the forest laws that came about in 1865 for the first time. And at that time, it used to be referred to as scientific management of the forest, which essentially meant that the forest was to be managed as a production system that would provide timber. This was also the time when railways were expanding in the country, and railways at that time needed wooden sleepers. So forested areas in India were cleared to a very large extent to provide those timber sleepers to the expanding railway network. So this Act of 1865, it started to manage forests as protection as production systems. So these had to be protected. However, prevalent usages were recognized as rights, and this was also the justification for creating reserves, so to say, what we now know as the reserve forest. And of course, as I said, this is also the advent of the forest management system. It had nothing to do with people, right? So community-based conservation was not something that was practiced in the Sundarbans. And as you will see, by the time I finish, it isn't still being practiced the way it should be or could be, right? The Forest Act underwent revisions in 1878. We created categories called reserve forest and protected forest. Protected forests were essentially forests that would be opened up for settlement. So the map that I showed you from the 1830s, which is clearly showing the natural forested area of the Sundarbans, which has now become half of what it used to be, actually a little less than half of what it used to be. The protected forests, by the consent of the Forest Department, could be opened up for settlement. So obviously that green patch did not shrink to half its size overnight. Some places saw deforestation much earlier than other parts within the Sundarbans region, particularly in the eastern part, which is now in Bangladesh. The western part were opened up much later. This is primarily because the water channels in the eastern part carry fresh water, whereas on the western side they carry brackish water, and therefore that water is unfit for cultivation. So there was little interest in bringing these land areas under cultivation on the western side. Whereas on the eastern side, people cleared up forest as far as they could go. If you look at the map or think of it, if you look at the very western part, which is where the river Hooghly still flows, and because of the Farakka barrage, we have flow around the year, which otherwise would not be the case. Again, clearing of the forest areas has gone as far south as possible. As we start moving east on the Indian side, the forest becomes wider and wider simply because the water is not usable, and there was little interest in clearing those forest areas for agricultural purposes. And also within the forest administration, there was this realization that unless the natural area is managed, sustainable supply of timber would not be possible, right? And therefore, the desire for conservation and preservation, more conservation than preservation, in the case of the Sundarbans, came from within the administration rather than a demand from the community in and around the region, right? Just a moment. Yeah. And we did not change anything after India became independent so far as governing our forest areas were concerned until 1972, when we enacted the Wildlife Protection Act, which no longer permitted hunting, which also created schedules and where different species are listed, and the degree of protection is different based on which schedule an animal belongs to. So, for example, all Schedule 1 animals within the Wildlife Protection Act are highly protected. The penalties for causing harm to these species is fairly severe. The enforcement is also fairly severe and strict. Nowhere do you see the community here, right? And this went on until 1988. So we went about pretty much the way the colonial administration went about administering the forest. The National Forest Policy of 1988, for the first time, recognized that conservation cannot be practiced by keeping people aside. So their participation, their cooperation has to be sought, encouraged. They have to be made partners in the endeavor. Only then would natural areas be protected and conserved. So if you look at the forest administration of Government of West Bengal with Sundarbans region, there are essentially two areas. One is the Sundarban Tiger Reserve, and there is a smaller part. I mean, when I say small, it is fairly large. It's over 1,600 square kilometers, but not part of the Tiger Reserve, but a natural area nevertheless. That is within the South 24 Parganas Forest Division. And they have a handful of people. The Tiger Reserve has about 100 people within the Forest Directorate, and the division has even fewer. Whereas the forest fringe population is over a quarter million. Now, obviously, a handful of people, maybe 100, 150, cannot keep a 250,000 population at bay. So there is, desire within the community to keep the forest conserved. If any outsider, particularly filmmakers, tigers in the Sundarbans are given a bad name. They're called the man-eaters. which I dispute quite vehemently. Although the incidents of human-wildlife conflict are high, a number of people get killed, but all of this is happening within the forest area. The tigers or the crocodiles or the sharks don't come pursuing people. So I don't think any one of them are man-eaters per se. When filmmakers particularly, when they come and ask people whether they consider the tigers to be man-eaters and whether they want the tigers to be eliminated, I'm yet to come across one single person saying, yes, the tigers must, or the crocodiles must go. So there is this inherent desire of the community to keep the system thriving. For the simple reason that they draw resources for their sustenance. They get minor forest produce in terms of honey, wax, fish and crabs. All of this with the dependence, particularly from these 46 forest fringe villages that are just adjoining the natural area, is fairly high. And despite the fact that there is not much opportunity within the current legal framework for co-management, there is this inherent desire to keep the system going. We've had the joint forest management as a concept put to practice since 1990. But again, this participation is not really meaningful. So it's not community-based conservation. The convener is a ground level forest official of the committee. It is predominantly composed of males, very little women participation from the community. And there are two components to it. So one is the JFM, Joint Forest Management, essentially has two parts. One is protection. So many of these committees are called forest protection committees. And the other is to bring about changes in their livelihood, to provide support. So one is the livelihood creation part of it, and the other is the protection part of it. In the livelihood creation part of it, this forest department or the directorate has provided support to forest fringe communities to different degrees. Because we are talking in the context of disasters, it should be acknowledged and recognized that in case of disasters, they are the only officials from the state who are around. So the forest officials are the first responders when disaster strikes the Sundarbans. In terms of conservation and the relationship between communities and the natural areas or the forested areas, in 2006 we have the Forest Rights Act, which guarantees certain rights of forest dwelling scheduled tribes and other forest dwellers, those who have been around and can establish that they've been around for 75 years or so. But in the Sundarbans, it is challenging because, as you recall, that the forest has shrunk to half its size, and therefore the frontier between the settled and the forested has shifted over a period of time. And therefore, to identify who is a forest fringe dweller, I mean, the current forest fringe dwellers are obviously current forest fringe dwellers, but 75 years back from the enactment of that act, there would be other areas that are not currently forest fringe would qualify as forest fringe. So putting the Forest Rights Act to practice in the Sundarbans has been a challenge. So there is little community conservation, but the desire of the community is to keep the natural area in a way that it can sustain them. I'll stop here. I think I've run out of my time of 12:15. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. for discussing all these important topics from livelihood to the policies and all the different forest related acts from British times to till now, and about the Sundarban region, how the area is decreasing due to the different climate related issues, high temperature, storms. So, participants, the floor is open for questions and queries. If anyone have something to ask to the sir, they can unmute themselves and ask. Till then, I have one question, sir.
Yes, Suresh.
It is a set of questions actually. That first is at at which extent solutions are available for Sundarban region in practical format, and if solutions are available, and how many of them are being really implemented on the ground, or they are only available in the literature form.
No, say for example, when it comes to protecting people's lives, disaster shelters and the kind, um, those are now, quite widespread. When I had started working, there were only a couple, but since then it has improved. Finding shelter in terms of high intensity weather events is not such a challenge anymore. And of course, since then, we've also had the NDRF, and we have the bordering state of Odisha, which often sends us their state disaster response force to help. So that help is available. When it comes to livelihood is where the challenge is. There is some amount of salt tolerant agriculture that is being promoted. Even we promoted for a while within WWF. But then we realized that the production is relatively smaller compared to what the cultivators practice. So the moment the crisis is gone, there is little interest amongst the farmers to continue to cultivate salt tolerant paddy varieties. And then they kind of disappear till the time that the next storm strike happens. And then readily saplings or seedlings may not be available. So that's one challenge. So far as fish and fishery is concerned, that's a major challenge. The only structure that I've shown you in the presentation is an experimental structure from the university. It's not put to practice. So in terms of livelihood, it gets massively disrupted, and people have to depend on external support to get over the crisis. For example, we were hit by a cyclonic storm called Ayla in 2009. Ayla ration is still being given out because it could not be withdrawn, because every time the government thought of withdrawing it, there was another strike, another storm strike. So despite the fact that it is now more than 10 years, the Ayla ration is still on. And fortunately, because COVID was also declared as a disaster for the people of the Sundarbans and maybe other areas in the country, which are equally vulnerable and stressed, the COVID ration is also helpful. So people are secured in terms of feeding themselves, but in terms of an occupation, in terms of a livelihood, that is not secure at all.
Thank you, sir. One more. As I
Yes.
said, I have set of questions. Sir, this is about the, I think, sir, these kind of studies on Sundarban region is how much effective, because a lot of researcher and lot of agencies are doing a lot of research in this area. So, what are the impact and what are the solutions they can provide? Any advisor about that?
As I said, our own experience shows that it is not one thing. Say, for example, Professor Tuin Ghosh, who's from Jadavpur University, they have a School of Oceanography. They have a huge amount of research in the region. That science can be put to use. Professor Satpathy is from Calcutta University Geography Department. Again, their department has a huge amount of work. And of course, there are others. Someone has to combine all this information that is coming out and make it usable for the communities. Otherwise, say, for example, if I know, the rate of land loss in the Sundarbans is, say, 5 hectares, for example, what do I do with that information? Or if my relative sea level rise is, say, 12 millimeters or 8 millimeters per year, what do I do with that? Right. So I have to bring in all the knowledge that is available, including, as I said, market knowledge. There is very little work or practically no work in the Sundarbans to make livelihoods more resilient, more economically viable. If we want these people to be fed, they are already being fed, as I said, because of the ILA ration, because of the COVID ration, they are being fed. But nobody just wants to be fed. They want to have meaningful occupations. So do the people of the Sundarbans. To make it meaningful, all of this information and probably additional information will have to be brought together, synthesized, and programs, defined accordingly. But then again, if we look at our governance structure, we have these silos of various departments and directorates that makes it difficult. Although the Sundarbans is lucky in a way that it has a department, and it has had it since the 1970s, which is called the Sundarban Affairs Department, headed by a minister, often a cabinet minister. But again, it has a defined geography. What it does is provide money to the other line departments. For example, it will provide money to the Public Works Department to build a bridge. It will provide money to the Irrigation Department to build an embankment. Now, that is not what a department that could collect, collate, and synthesize this information and design intervention should be doing. It has a budget of more than 900 crores every year. So if it is building a big bridge and transfers 300 crores to the PWD department, it thinks it's very successful. It's very happy. Now that is one. We will need connectivity, but then that connectivity should also cater to, and result in improved earning for the people.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any
I
questions?
have 2 questions from you.
Yes.
Sir, firstly, thank you for such a well-documented and well-structured presentation. Thank you for that. And the first question is, you have presented a map which was showing the changes of area of Indian and Bangladesh part of Sundarban Delta. So I was striking to see that according to the topo sheet map of 1954, the Bangladesh part of Sundarban area was 5320 kilometers square. And on 2010, it has been increased at about 147 kilometers square. Whereas the part of Indian Sundarban Delta, it has been decreased at about 600 square kilometer. It was really striking to me that the portion of Bangladesh is increased, whereas the portion of Indian ISD is decreased in this high rate.
See, one of the reasons in that the Bangladesh forested area, by the way, that's the forested area and not the deltaic geographical area. The forested area in the Brahmaputra Delta is actually increasing because the delta is becoming bigger and bigger. So it's a prograding delta. Okay. Whereas on our side, which is entirely composed of the Ganga Delta, it is a degrading delta.
Okay, it's a very good information. The Brahmaputra part which is increasing. Okay.
Yeah. Because if you look at the flow of Brahmaputra, both in terms of water and silt, is not as hindered as it is in case of the Ganga Delta or the Ganga River itself. Right. I mean, we have started intervening as high as dairy. You know, that's our first major intervention, and the last major intervention is Farakka. And in between dairy and Farakka, Central Water Commission has an atlas. You will find at least, I mean, small, big, medium, all of these interventions, including lift irrigation. There are at least 6,000 interventions. So if this is what we are, drawing from the river, so obviously at the very end of the river we have challenges, right? And the all the rain-fed tributaries to the Hooghly, which passes by the side of the Sundarbans and the city of Kolkata, the rain-fed system that draws from the Chotanagpur plateau, they've also, all of them have been intervened with. Not a single river that would flow into the Hooghly is left unhindered, right? Of course, we want water management. We want water for cultivation in places that are difficult to otherwise, bring about crops. But it has a trade-off. So who suffers? The Sundarbans region pays the price for Bardhaman being the rice bowl of the state of West Bengal, right?
Thank you, sir. And I have another question to you.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is actually, I am working on Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality education. And as you are the expertise of SDG, so I would like to ask you that how this kind of work, or how a community-based approach could be connected to SDG 4 or quality education, so that I can work on such issues in
Okay.
future.
Yeah, but particularly for places that are more vulnerable, places like the Sundarbans, where quality education, skill building is far more important, because not everybody will be able to make a living within the region, right? So they will have to move per force. Either it is a force because of erosion, because of subsidence, because of sea level rise, or it is because of economic reasons. So either it is a push or it is a pull. What will make a huge difference is if this quality education and training is based on the aptitude of the child. We have no mechanism to assess the aptitude of the children of this country.
Right.
So when we think of quality education, somebody who is, a fish, likes to swim, we are trying to make that fish climb a tree. So obviously the outcome is, what it could be, or and therefore, I think if we are focusing on SDG 4, if we want quality education to have the impact that it can, it has to be aptitude based, and therefore aptitude assessment. And now that, in this country, we've been able to vaccinate so many people, trace so many people, we now know we can reach every individual. We have the capacity to not leave anybody behind. If it is vaccination, if it is aptitude, if it is education, if it is training, India has shown to the world that it can do it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I think our next speaker is also with us. And thank you so much, sir, for discussing all this topic and clearing all doubts. Participants, if you have any more questions, specifically for the sir, you can write to the Rika and they will convey it to the sir and you will get the answers. So we
Thank
will
you,
move
Shreyas.
forward, sir. Thank you
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much, sir, from
Thank you.
NIDM
Thank
side.
you. Thank you, Krishna. Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So moving forward, participant, we have our next topic, which is aspect of gender-based resilience in Sundarbans. And for this, we have Dr. Upasana Ghosh, Assistant Professor, IIPH. So with a brief introduction that Dr. Ghosh has expertise on indigenous health, environment health, climate change and disaster, public health nutrition, gender and health system, qualitative and patriarchy research techniques, So these are the some field where Dr. Ghosh is expertise. She has done PhD in social anthropology and also done MPhil in women studies. Her doctoral research was on social determinant of child health in the Indian Sundarbans. She is involved in researching on climate change impacts with national and international universities. So with this brief introduction, I request ma'am to uh, share his presentation and discuss with participants about the topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rika, for inviting me. That's great to be here. So let me try to share my screen, and maybe I'd like to stop my video just to save the connection. Hope it is fine. So is it visible? Yes,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So this is really interesting that for 3 days, 2 to 3 days, people are learning about Sundarbans, and this is really exciting. So my previous speaker Anuragda has already mentioned so many things about livelihood and Sundarbans situations. So I'm not going to go to that. I will tell you a story of a woman, how they are living in the Sundarbans. So we all know that that Sundarban is facing the climate change impact. Sundarban is facing land erosions, embankment breachings, salinity immigrations in land and freshwater sources. So what people are doing, people are migrating as a kind of their alternative livelihood. So major impact definitely because it is impacting on the traditional agrofishing livelihood of the people. And you can see from the pictures, and my previous speakers have already told all these major impacts of climate induced events in Sundarbans. So interestingly, that the migration is happening mostly seasonal, and at the same time mostly by the male folks of the region. So if we see that Sundarbans is such a region which is facing the climatic vagaries almost every year. You may know that Sundarbans faced the cyclone Amphan in 2020 and cyclone Yash in 2020. Amphan in 2021, Yash in 2022. So, but what happens? Like Anuradha mentions, Ayla happened in 2009. Then almost 10 to 12 years. The situation is more or less same as you can see from this picture. So this is how the life in Sundarbans after Amphan and Yash. Now the male folks, as the male folks are they are moving out for as a seasonal migrant to the other cities, other states of India. So women have to be there. So why women have to be there? Because one definite thing is because of the gender norm that a woman needs to be at the home. The second thing is that they have to take care of the children. They have to take care of the elderly people who are at home at present, who cannot migrate out or who cannot take part in alternative livelihood process. So now the women are basically having a triple burden of work. So they have to do the household chores, which is a solely woman's responsibility. They have to do childcare, but at the same time, in this changing scenario, they have to take part in the livelihood restoration process also. Because the economic burdens are so high, so they have to, the women who suppose previously they were not so much into the livelihood earning processes, they have to join the marginal workforces. So most of the women, if you see the statistics, most of the women in from Sundarbans, they are joining the marginal workforce, not in the main workforce, but in the marginal workforce. So the But interestingly, the situation is changing, and the societal construct of men and women, that is also changing in this changing scenario. So women became the breadwinners now. They are earning breads. They are also in a good process of earning their own money. But the process is definitely risky and strenuous because they have to go to the reserve forest. As you can see in this picture, that's the entire region is the reserve forest. They have to go to the jungle despite of the tiger attack, despite of the crocodile attack. They have to collect the firewood and many other collections. So another thing is that they have to take part in the livelihood processes with whatever available within the islands. So maybe it is an agri labor, maybe it is the traditional but restricted nindhar, that means the prawn seeds collections. They have to take part as the daily laborer. They have to take part as the embroidery worker, which they are not skilled. But at the same times, because all these activities are to some extent considered as marginal activities, without the skill activities, the women are getting much less wages than their counterparts. Another thing that is now getting a huge impact in the Sundarbans, especially in the southern part and north part as well as, it's a water stress. You know, in many parts of India, the fetching the water is basically a woman's responsibility. So here there is no exception in the Sundarbans. So, but at the same time, the water level, the groundwater level in Sundarbans is getting lower and lower, and the water stress is coming as a huge burden on the people. So, for examples, previously what happened, it has a direct linkage to the climate and disasters situations of Sundarbans. Because there is climatic impacts on the agriculture. So the farmers need more water, more fresh water, because the lands are getting saline. So the farmers need more fresh water from the ground, and who can afford? They are putting the big pumps to extract the groundwater. So by doing that, the groundwater level has, it started maybe after Ayla, or soon after the few disasters, few cyclones Sundarbans had. So after that, like in last 7 to 10 years, the groundwater level is really depleting in a very scary sense. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Yeah. Okay. So due to that as the groundwater level is depleting, most of the tube wells, which has been situated across the villages, they are losing their water. So sometimes most of the tube wells are giving the saline waters, or it's a very contaminated waters. And now the situation is like people have to buy drinking water. So you can imagine that at improvised area like Sundarbans, people have to buy a bottle of water, though not like, forget about the Bisleri or some kind Kinley type of water. It's the local people who are some kind of distillations, doing the distillation of the water and selling to these remote villages. They have to buy a bucket of water even in 50 rupees. So for drinking, for doing some or cooking, for cooking and drinking, they have to buy the water. Rest, they are still managing with this contaminated and saline water. So this huge water stress is basically on the woman, as for two reasons: as it is a sole responsibility on the woman. Second, the male folks are not available all the time in the vicinity of the households or in the village. So they are having this stress also. Now, another challenge, that is the broken shoulder, the shelter. It's like every time the cyclones and floodings, and not even the big floodings or big cyclones like Amphan or Yash. The erosion rate, as Anuradha has already mentioned, erosion rate is very high in this region. And the lands, the homesteads, the agricultural lands are gradually eroding by these challenges. So you can see that how many times a household have to build their shelter, and they are retreating towards the stable mainland. So this is another challenge, as because the husbands are not present or the fathers are not present, women have to take care of this household's rebuild. So they have to take care of this kind of activities also. Now the challenges they express. So during my research, the woman who expressed that what are the challenges they are facing. So the first challenge is definitely, they said that they cannot migrate with their husbands because they have to do the child care and the elderly care. They have to look after the households, whatever the little agricultural land they have, and the other residual assets they are still having. They have the social norms because Sundarbans is a very patriarchal regions, and the woman just cannot, get out with her husband because she has to take care of her in-laws. Some women also said that they have a lack of aspiration of going out. They feel like we are the people of this island, and we wish to stay here. So that mainly there is a generation gap, but in terms of the perceptions of living in the island, but definitely some women, the elderly women, are expressing that too. Challenge two, the second challenge is definitely the less and very risky options available within the island. So working as the agricultural laborer in betel leaf cultivations, in low wage or any other wage laboring options in the village available, very less options are available. As we can understand, there is no industry, there is no constructions going on. So the women are getting very less options there for wage laboring. So mostly they are now tending towards the strenuous and risky options like crab catching. So though definitely it's beneficial, at least before COVID it was giving them a good amount of money. But at the same time, they are very prone to the tiger and crocodile attack while going to catch the crab in the knee-deep saline water near to the reserve forest. There is as the accessibility issue is still to some extent there, it is not very cost effective for the woman to go to the other mainland parts or the nearby towns of Sundarbans, especially I'm talking about the southern part of Sundarbans, to go and earn some extra money. So, and at the same time, it has a kind of opportunity cost because they are losing the time while going and coming to a distance for wage laboring or for any other job, because they are unable to take care of the children, which especially the young children, they need, and it has a huge impact on the children's nutrition and responsive feeding. So that is a different study we did, but definitely there is a huge problem of mother are unable to take care of the young children because she has to give all her time and energy and effort to restore the livelihood. So the third major challenge the women are facing is the lack of skill and training to take the alternatives. They are the age-old practiced, they are the traditional fisherwoman and agriculturists. So they don't have, like, for example, some women tried to do some embroidery work, But Sundarbans region is not very traditionally they are not the artisans in that sense. They were always the fisher folk or the agriculturist. So whatever they are trying now, it's not that skill worthy to like the other parts of the woman in India who are doing an artisan, who are the traditional artisans. So here they are getting the less options also. There is no I mean, I can't say there is no training, but there are very limited training for the new skills developments of any handicrafts or embroidery or any other vocational training courses, specifically the marginalized communities in the Sundarbans. uh, in other studies, we can see that this woman, particularly this woman, are not very well connected with the SEGs and other community-based skill building organizations. Though the NGOs, the CBOs are trying their best to restore the agriculture, to restore the skill building of the woman, but still their works are patchy and scratchy. So it's not across the Sundarbans and especially with the marginalized sections of the society. So that lacking is still there. Another major challenge that I would like to mention here that is facing by the woman is the domestic violence and mental stressors. See, the increasing uncertainty of the, especially the livelihood restorations, are increasing tussles and quarreling between the family members, not only within the husbands and wife only, but with the in-laws, with the brothers, sisters. So the families are breaking into nuclear families just because they are unable to take the burden of the expenses. So it I mean, it's supposed to be opposite, but here the options of livelihood are so less, and they are mainly dependent on the remittance they are getting from their husbands. They are trying to, separate, I mean, reduce the number of the family members. So that's the situation, that's uncertain situations has a kind of mental stressors for all the family members, and as the women of the households are definitely, due to the patriarchal norms, they are the kind of the second they put always second in the societies. They are facing the major domestic violence and the mental health issues, challenges. It can be adulteries because the husbands are going out, they are having the good life, I mean, so-called good life in the cities, and having an affair or something like that. And that often lead to deliberate self-harm like suicides. So it's about, and definitely there are also both the husbands and wife, both the couples are facing that the insecurity about the life and the future of their children specifically. So this entire phobic situations, entire uncertain situations are putting the woman a major challenges like domestic violence and mental health problem. Another interesting but very unfortunate incident is happening now with the woman is the early marriages of the teenage girls. After Amphan and Yash, you can find out that in many places, especially in the southern part of the Sundarbans, the families get their girl childs married. So one reason definitely is to reduce amount from the food plate of the households. Another interesting thing is getting getting a support during the emergency if the girls are married outside the island. So that is very interesting, I would say. The girls are getting married to the mainland, a part of the Sundarbans, which is stable and not very much facing the disaster or climate change related events. So that is an interesting thing. Definitely, these parents are found difficult to maintain the girls' education cost, and in our rural societies or in the general Indian societies, the tendency is like if the girl is sitting at home, let her get married. So that is a very big challenge now, I would say, in terms of gender, especially with the girls in the in Sundarbans, because it is giving a kind of vicious cycle of malnutrition, early marriage, teenage pregnancy, then again low birth weight baby. If we see in terms of the health, the entire life cycle of these girls are changing. So this is a very vulnerable situations. The adolescents girls are there. Adolescents boys are there. They are also vulnerable, but in different terms because they have to migrate out as the strenuous wage laborers as soon as they are like 15, 16. So they have their own vulnerability. The boys have their own vulnerabilities too. For the girls, there are another layer of vulnerability that whether it is a marriage or an arranged trafficking, the line is very blurred. It is very difficult to understand that whether you are getting your daughter married off or there is a underlying underlying racket of girls traffickers. So some NGOs have the data that's they who are working with the women and girls in the Sundarbans. They have the data that after every cyclones, Kolkata's brothels have an increasing number of girls and women as sex workers um, from the Sundarbans. So those are not official data; those are collected by the NGOs working with the girls, and that is definitely there. So breaking of joint families, I have already mentioned. And last but not the least, after all these negative thoughts, all these negative, so-called negative vulnerability presentations, the woman of Sundarbans' main resilience is they are very aspirational. Many of the women islanders, they have future aspiration to buy a plot or a plot of land at a secure place to secure the future of their children. Most of them are feeling like they are accumulating resources, accumulating money to buy a safer shelter outside this island. So that's their aspirations. They are trying to secure the islands by concrete embankments. I'm not going to in that debate whether it is scientifically good or not. This is the aspirations of the woman. Now they are feeling a bit empowered because they said that they are doing a man's job while restoring their own livelihood. They are enjoying this economic independence and the little empowerment they are getting by earning their own money. And they really want what they really want, and they are asking every time is how to develop a new skill, new livelihood skill, so that they can earn more money. So I think this is the best resilience aspects the women are giving to us, but it's our time, our responsibility as civil societies, as researchers, as government, to give them back support to keep this resilience up and support in their fighting, which their daily experiences they are facing into their daily day and day life. Thank you.
Ma'am, ma'am. Hello, I'm audible. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. If participants have any question, they can ask, or we can take questions after this discussion session.
Yeah. Nice. Is there any problem, Shreyas?
Hello. Yes, so I will take over from here. Thank you, Dr. Upasana, for the wonderful presentation and highlighting the challenges. Participants, you can put on your questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, we have within us Dr. Ranit to give the concluding remarks and the way forward. Dr. Ranit, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And let me just possibly project my screen quickly. So I actually was listening to Upasana's presentation as well. And Upasana and me, we have worked for at least last 3 years together. So I know the kind of extensive work she is doing. And I'm sure that all of you who have actually been part of this 3-day online training program by now have got a grasp or a kind of a grasp on the risk and challenges posed by different natural hazards, and also the kind of degradation of the ecosystem services in the Indian Sundarbans. And I'm sure, I'm not sure if anyone is joining from the other side of the border, the administrative border, but Sundarbans, and both like Indian side as well as Bangladesh side has almost the same issues. So, and that's why when we say that though we have our boundaries, but then when it comes to hazards and disasters, they are the unification factors where we share and learn together. And Sundarbans is a very good example of that. And also, I guess you have got an understanding of how livelihood changes and ecosystem is very much interlinked. It doesn't work in silo, and how like the physical infrastructure, the natural infrastructure, the economic, social infrastructure, everything is actually very important for reducing, conserving, and maintaining the ecosystem services for our own benefit. And that's, I think, one of the major takeaway that we have through this training program. And as a way forward, or as a next step, what we want to do is look at the linkages between stakeholders to deal with this complex economic, social, and ecological interdependencies in the Indian Sundarbans. And this we want to deal through our research work, as I had shared in the first day. And we want to get into more ground level research to understand how it is being happening, how each of this hazard event actually is making the situation more dynamic and making people think and kind of manage this situation. We are also going to strengthen the study on effect of interventions on the provision of ecosystem services and their trade-offs. So it's very important that when we take a step, we need to evaluate whether that step that we are taking has both pros and cons, or is it just we just think about the positive side of it. And understanding the negative impacts or the trade-offs is very important, because many a times it happens that we possibly turn a blind eye to the negative impact. So I think that's a very important aspect, and which we need to understand, and that will happen only through the ground level engagement. And the third is contribute to the decisions made by the local community. And these decisions, the contribution is through scientific research, because if we can give a scientific background to whatever is happening, if we can arm the local community with the scientific knowledge, possibly that will help them in upgrading their practices, that will help them in upgrading their local knowledge, and that is for the best interest of the environment. So this is something that I wanted to conclude here for this 3-day training program, but this is just a first step. And I again invite all of you to be part of this study, be engaged with us. And if you want to contribute to this study, feel free to write to us. So with that, I hand it over back to Krishnakali. And before I do that, I again thank NIDM, Professor Chandan Ghosh sir, Dr. Garima and the whole team of NIDM for supporting this study, and also my teammates at RICA for being a wonderful support and taking this, I think, making this whole training program happen, and also the future study, the involvement in the future study. So back to you, Krishna.
Thank you, Dr. Janet. It was a really good learning experience for all of us. Participants, if you have any questions for Dr. Upasana's lecture, please put up in the chat box so we can take it with ma'am, and she's still among us to answer the questions. Meanwhile, I would like to call upon Dr. Chandan Ghosh, sir, for his concluding remarks. Sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Krishna Kali, and also all participants over here, especially after Dr. Ranit has given that what are the action points to be taken forward, and also giving a brief outline on what has happened in the last 3 days. And in this regard, we would say that yes, we have shared our experience, and the people that who are working on that, especially NIRI or Jadavpur University and many other institutes working on Sundarbans. And also we have got who are now also working on the Sundarbans from West Bengal. And we have mentioned about the Indian side of Sundarbans, even though we say that it is Sundarbans is same in the Bangladesh side and our side, but we take care of ours, but at the same time, other side also is equally important. And when we speak same language, when we have that all arrangement to visit there, to coordinate what is they are doing, who is going ahead with what kind of actions on that. So there is a scope for even sharing what they are doing, what we are doing in the next say one year or this financial year with RICA, because information are available. In that case, it is, if they are doing something better, of course, that can be adapted to RICA and IDM study, or whoever is that working in that site, let us connect them also. Because in this program, we have taken experts or shared everything, whatever whoever is working from India. But as online program has opened up doors to everyone, so we'd like to see that through that RICA and IDM team, let us look at that. Who are those select people whom you might be knowing, but let us connect to them also. This is one aspect. And as far as the problems being shared through various presentation, and the kind of life that people are dealing over there, and the events that have been happening. Fortunately, this time, no such cyclone yet, or maybe it may not be. Maybe we have to wait for next May onward, because last 2, 3, 4 years that we see. And when water is everywhere and water is still there, it is something, and the kind of water distribution network or collection drinking water supply network, it is all due to the TUL kind of systems that are there. So there may be going several programs, statewide program, or in Sundarbans, many projects are going on. So, so we would like to see that what are those projects. Let us flag those projects that are going on. Even after cyclone Yash, West Bengal government has given 5 to 6 projects based on the expression of interest, and with a pilot study in 6, 7 places. Of course, this was the matter in June, July of this year. And so what are those projects that going on? That also we have to keep in track while taking up the research study. And third aspect is that in my presentation, especially I showed that what are the intervention to be made, whether it is soft measures or hard measures, and how livelihood of the people can be taken care of by bioengineering, as well as saving some of those water barriers or embankments, levees, dikes that available. So in that case, okay, in conference we can, or in such kind of seminar we can express, but it is very important to know that what Sundarban division of West Bengal has been doing, even though I have shown post-cyclone impact on the embankment with the brick layers that they are putting and more brick that they are keeping to use them in the same manner as a protection measures from for the embankment slope. And then what are the alternative measures to be taken? It is a suggestion as well as some pilot study also taken up. So we have to keep a cognizance of those work that which is already going on, already done, whether it is failed or not working or whether it is successful. Then in that case, we have to keep in track with that what are the already existing work is going on and what has gone wrong and what has gone right. Because our suggestion will remain only here, but in order to take it, because we always want to see that whatever suggestions we are making, let us implement 1, 2, 3 aspects of that by visiting there, and that visit is due. And of course, I'm visiting there on the 15th, 16th, 17th on a different program with Jadavpur University. And so there we'll see that again, a plantation of the vetiver grass, which we have been doing in several such training programs, will be taken place. And second day, we'll be having a tour from Koikhali on a boat. Their discussion and identification and then site that we are seeing. So there we'll come down from the boat, and our plan is to take the vetiver grass and plant them with all the participants. 50+ participants are expected to join. So one thing is, it is not only seeing the site, but it is also dealing with the site. And whatever nature has given, which I have highlighted in my presentation, that plant them by ourselves. Or the people that who are working there, and see and observe, because there are a lot of studies are taken place, which are the species are going to survive or not, and what are the flora, fauna already there, and of course, especially about the mangroves. A lot of improvement, a lot of things are talked about that. But taking mangroves in one hand and taking some other species like vetiver grass along with that, and whatever waterfront or water barrier structure like embankments are there, and where they have gone, then put some structural measures, or even I have suggested about making embankment. Of course, I'm not saying that making embankment is a suggestion, but for this study that we are taking up, at least we can highlight in the report based on the examples and based on some site selection that we can motivate, because in our program here, officials from West Bengal government and we were expressing they are directly, indirectly associated with Sundarban development. In that case, let us motivate those people and go to those villages which are affected and take certain measures that which are highlighted elsewhere also, and I have also highlighted something. And more so, the fourth point, the last point I would like to say, especially seeing that water stress is there when water is everywhere. And there are so much of technology has come, and with solar panel and also producing drinkable water without electricity, even without solar also. That there are certain devices that are available which are much, much efficient than conventional tube wells that are in place in the villages where, village ladies have to go miles sometimes, which we have been seeing since our birth. So the kind of technological intervention that this water need not to be collected from the through a tube well where quality of them are not ensured. Of course, whatever they are taking, when water is everywhere, the kind of system that which can convert any kind of water, whether it is sewage water, whether it is kitchen, say outlet water, whether it is pond, or whether it is salt water. And this is a carryable item, and which are available in the market also. And it has got a capacity that one such machine can make in one day more than, say, 1200 liters of water. And instant, it gives instant. No electricity is also required. So there are various versions of this machine, water, purification devices, which doesn't need electricity. But these days, even getting electricity with a solar panel has become more easier. But there are solar panel induced, say, water, say purification units are, plenty of them are available. So those who are living in that area, even one such machine spending maybe 20,000 to 25,000 can take care of entire village because it is carryable. And one such system, I know it is not even 20 kilo. One can carry on the back as a backpack and take it to different places and supply the water to the door to door. And it can again generate when, bottles of waters are made available, Bisleri bottles and other things. And we know that it is not affordable to many, but when such systems are available, which can generate 1200 liters of water or 1000 liters of water in 1 hour, that kind of machineries are also available. Then we have to take a role that by spending or by taking or collecting even 20,000, entire village having, say, 1,000 people, their water needs or stress that which we have been describing, that can be taken care of instantly by not installation is not required, by having, owning or purchasing such a system. So where conventionally we have been looking at that what is the water stress, and we have been seeing that they are facing trouble even though water is there. But then we have to bring, in addition to Bisleri bottles, then which are available, which are not affordable, every nook and corner of the country, and 20 rupees a liter. Everywhere system is that it is 20 rupees a liter, other than Nirjal, which may be few rupees cheaper in our trains. But let us take some lateral approach in reaching to the needs of the people, where when people are not able to afford 20 rupee for 1 liter, while this machine would not cost even 50 paisa per liter if it is supplied, if it is taken and on a cooperative 20,000 rupees, any 4, 5, 10 people can invest. When in the villages or even in the riverside, when temporary bridges are being given by irrigation department or on a lease for 50 lakh or 60 lakh, and there are 30, 40 people, they contribute equivalent or some amount and accumulate to meet the tender requirement. And then throughout the year, they run the ferry or some kind of temporary bridges, which are blown away several times. And so much of money gets recirculated from the village economy. When it is in lakhs, 50 lakh ones that I have seen in Midnapur district near Vidyasagar University, their tender value is around 50 lakh, which gets circulated and procured by providing the ferry services throughout the year. Of course, 3-4 times it is being blown away. So that 50 lakh is going to whoever, or irrigation department or government or whoever in charge, because river, and it is going to that department, and in return no improvement is being made. So there is when a cyclic economy can be created to the tune of money at 50 lakh by ferrying the people on a temporary such structure, which are blown away 4 or 5 times by the flood. So creating a 20,000 rupee economy for the village who are in the water stress is a matter of, within 7 days or 10 days, money can be taken up. It will not take 1 year to get there, but resulting that, we can ensure through various NGO or service agency or the people itself, some of the people, they can procure 1,000, 120 of them make such a good, and they can make and purchase this thing from the open market and make at least water availability affordable in all sense. So this is what that I would like to say, that the problem has to be taken up using the community, which Dr. Ranit also has highlighted, and being there, visiting there, not simply by going with a format or Google form and seeing the reactions or actions and other things, what kind of pathetic life they are dealing. It is enough. It is enough. Let us take some stake by being with them, and then solve the problem and develop the livelihood. I think within themselves would be the more appropriate actions of the research that, or the study that NIDM and RICA is going to take up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words were very informative, and probably this will provide us a path to decide and work forward. And not only for RICA and NIDM, but for all the participants who are present here, for their research and evolving their studies and understanding to deal with Sundarbans, moving ahead from only the desk reviews and textbook knowledge, going into the fields and being with the community and understanding from their perspective is something which we actually need to do to bridge the knowledge gaps which we have in all these studies, be it the scientific aspect or the social aspect. Now moving ahead, I would like to call Dr. Garima to share her thoughts.
Thank you, Krishna Kadiji, and dear panelist, Professor Ghosh. I think we already had two, panelists already spoken about and briefed about what has happened in last 3 days and what are the measures which we are supposed to take. There is no doubt that Sundarban region is actually flourishing as one of the largest delta in the world, and it is supposed to be one of the fertile region as well, and home to a spectrum of flora and fauna. So the last 3 days have been quite enriching to understand the gravity of problem of Sundarban and how these different sets of people, infrastructure, socio-economic conditions, occupational conditions are getting affected due to the regular cyclones and storm surge and effects of climate change, how the life has been changed over there. In these 3 days, we have been learning about how the agriculture is also getting impacted because of they don't have much knowledge about how to do salt tolerant cropping and all, and which is reducing the occupational agriculture occupation over there, and bifurcation of occupation is taking place, and adaptation of occupation is something which is more challenging over there because people are engaged into labor work instead of any skilled work. They are not into any skilled work now, they are into labor work and other miscellaneous kind of work. As our last presenter also spoke about it, how gender is also getting impacted due to the change of occupation and this livelihood over there. So the women are coming as a breadwinner over there, but they are not much educated and they are not skilled, so they are getting into the mainstreaming sort of work as well, and which is not which needs to be taken care of, that how these kind of issues, social issues which are coming up over there due to the scarcity of water, due to scarcity of proper work. Proper housing facility is also getting impacted because so many cyclones and storm surge take place over the years. We can see that every now and then we have damaged houses over there, damaged infrastructure, roads are damaged, buildings are damaged. So it all repairing work, everything we need, proper policy planning and a lot of, thinking about that, how to sustain such kind of areas which are like through the ecosystem based DRR measures. That's what I would like to put in. Like we need to develop an approach which actually basically mainstream through the development programs which are already going on. So as Professor Ghosh was just mentioning about the various projects are going on in this area, and how these projects are going on, whether they are taking care of these issues, like if they are doing construction work, are they making the all-weather roads, and the kind of construction activities which are happening over there, are they long-term, or again we are just restoring the same thing with the same methodologies and proper construction practices are not taken care of. So these things also need to be seen from the perspective of having a long-term sustainable development over there. So these issues are there, like the breaching of embankments is like something which always happen over there. The reason is very simple, that they have the soft, clay, and also, so what kind of practices we have to use, like sir spoke about the bioengineering solutions. So this is something which is maybe the more sustainable for these kind of areas. So such solutions we need to think about. We have to understand the problem and the gravity of the problem, and see that how these can be included in the development planning. Already a national disaster management plan is there. We have the state level policy on disaster management plan. There are Sundarban have a separate department which look after all these things. So how we can actually strengthen the existing regulatory mechanisms by adding the DRR measures and the which can actually solve the overall problem of that area. So with this, I would like to say that we need to look at the long-term solutions to empower the people of the community to engage in sustainable and natural livelihood options, so that we could reduce the out-migration in the region. We need to implement mitigation measures and constructing sustainable structures, be it embankment or the buildings. We need to strengthen the natural infrastructure for reducing the soil erosion and restricting the high tides. We need to encourage the skill development courses over there, especially for the women, besides safety of their integrity and honor, which is degrading as well. So discouraging development in the high tide and flood prone region and relocation resettlement of the population. We should have some policy for that, so that the areas which are getting affected every time, probably we may need to sensitize them so that they can relocate themselves from there, or through the government policy that can be done. Another important aspect is how to bring out the behavior change in the people. Any society could be strong when they have a strong cultural values, education, and community feeling. So maybe through increasing their level of education, their skill, their inculcating volunteerism spirit and social cohesion, we can empower them, and we can do. But of course, we need long-term strategy, so that the local government also need to be empowered for conducting such exercises. So, so the point is how we can achieve all of it, and already several policies are there and guidelines are there. Do we think that they are sufficient, or they need to be modified according to the conditions over there? And we need to actually, like we are talking about, having coordination with various stakeholders. So it is something which we have to understand, that how this coordination has to be generated, what could be the processes behind that, and we have to detail out each and every aspect of it, because it is very easy to said than done, and various policies are already there, but how it will going to benefit the local community. So this is something which on which we are supposed to work. Maybe in future, as a part of our study, we are going to focus on this. The previous speakers have also shared that various, references and research work, a lot of research work which has been done in this region. But still we need to understand how that good research which is happening in bits and pieces could be bring together and also could be integrated in the policies which are existing over there, or some new policies are required. So how these all integration can take place, we need to understand that, and we need to make certain suggestions to improve the existing policies of the government and programs. And the last, I believe that mainstreaming of DRR and CCA measures into development programs is very important over there, and we need to study that, how we can do it. With this, thank you very much. I thank each and every person who is available today and from last 3 days. And we have really had very enriching sort of this 3 days online training program. Each and every speaker was exemplary. I congratulate Dr. Ranit for bringing such, resources on this platform, where we could discuss with them about the issues in the Sundarban region, and we also could understand about the existing policies which are there. So thank you very much. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Garima. Thank you to all the participants for being such a wonderful audience and putting up good questions for our speakers and through all the 3 days. And for concluding this session now, I would like to ask if some participants have their any final recollections and thoughts on the OTP and the future ahead. Please put it in the chat box or unmute yourself to share your views.
For certificate, participant have to wait for around 2-3 days. When we receive the attendance sheet, we will upload it on a portal, and after that you will be able to generate your certificate. So don't worry, it will take time a little bit. So I think we can conclude it now. We can end this. Conclusion is done. Krishnakal, anyone have
Yes.
anything to say? No? Okay, now.
Participants, anybody?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I can see Dr. S.K. Azim Ali want to say. Anybody wants to interact, or can we have a group photograph by requesting everyone to switch on their camera?
Yeah, it can be done.
Can we can
That would be great if everybody can switch on their camera, and let us have a
Participants, please switch on your cameras.
camera. We have been interacting from last 3 days, so it would be great to see our participants also.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm waiting for more.
So we are planning to
Yes.
conduct such more, seminars on this particular topic, because it is an extremely important topic, and we are also considering it as one of the important research area. So I request all of you, so be tuned with our website and see when we have these presentations on Sundarban specific region, so we can have more interactive discussions on these issues. Thank you.
Okay. More photo?
I think everyone has not opened his cameras. If they will open, then we can take another shot also.
No.
अभी तो बहुत कम लोगों ने ऑन किया है खैर.
I think ले लेते हैं इसी को.
Yes.
Yeah, many are coming. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Taken this one. So, Krishnakali, you can end the meeting. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, should we close? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.